Hello and welcome to episode number 4 of Colours of COVID, the Alchemy Arts series set up in response to the COVID-19 pandemic and its impact on mental health. Today, I'm really excited to have a close friend, a dear friend of mine called Olatunde Spence. Olatunde Spence is a leading art psychotherapist and trauma therapist for Akoma Healing Arts. Ola, so happy to have you on. You know, I haven't spoken to you for a really long time, and I know you're really busy, so thank you so much for coming on.
Hi, Adele. Nice to speak to you too, and thanks for reaching out for this interview. Really pleased to be doing it.
Fantastic, fantastic. So I'll just do a quick little intro about what's going to be happening today in today's episode. So in today's episode, we're going to be taking a closer look at art therapy and how it can be used to help people cope with the current pandemic. As Ola will discuss in more detail later, art therapy is a form of psychotherapy that helps participants express their thoughts and feelings when they simply don't have the words. We will focus on how people can get involved with art therapy and what benefits it can bring. Okay, so Ola, to begin with, like I said, thank you so much for joining us. You've done, have you done anything like this before, these podcasts or any interviews like this before? In the recent time?
Yeah, I've done some interviews. I think the last thing I did was when I was working in Brazil, just to talk a bit about community development and how mental health and sort of community development sort of fit together. So that's the kind of only thing that I've done in the last few years.
Yeah, I mean, I was keen to get you on, Ola, just because of knowing you for such a long time and knowing, you know, the work that you've been doing over these years. And I wanted an opportunity for you to share some of that knowledge. Really, I've learned so much over the years from you. So it'll be nice to kind of for the viewers to kind of listen to that as well. Ola, just to explain in your own words to begin with what art therapy is and how it helps participants.
Okay, so I think from my point of view, as somebody who's been practicing for a long time, I think art therapy can be lots of things. So, you know, people sort of often think that, oh, well, I'll draw a picture and then somebody be able to sort of work out what's going on in my mind. Well, I just want to reassure people that's not what art therapy is. So for me, it's an invitation for people to use art materials. It could be, you know, there's art therapies which are about dance and about music, but I particularly work with visual arts and art materials. So for me, it's inviting somebody into a space to be absorbed in an activity. So when we're talking about sort of mental health, sometimes people are so caught up in their anxieties and difficulties that there's no sort of space to kind of just relax. So I would often introduce it, whether it's to a young person or an older person, just a chance to be absorbed in something that you can do for 10, 15, 20 minutes that takes your mind off whatever it is that you're actually worrying about. There's another part of art therapy, which is then about actually looking at what that image might be saying to you, or what that drawing's saying to you, or finding ways to look at the image to see what comes out of it. And I think, like you said at the beginning, you know, we're very much sort of focused on words and expressing things in words. Well, sometimes it's just really difficult to do that. People don't have the words, and that, you know, that lovely saying, you know, a picture paints 1,000 words. To me, that's something like what art therapy can be about.
Fantastic. So, you know, lockdown's been really testing time for the mental health for many people across the country. I guess that's where projects like this come in to try and help people overcome their anxieties and negative thoughts and feelings, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. When did you first learn about art therapy, and what was your initial reaction to it?
I think I'd first learned about it as a kind of curiosity. I didn't know where I knew about it from. I didn't grow up in a kind of environment where these were kind of words that you heard in your day-to-day life, but I knew about counselling. And I think I came across a course that was for 10 weeks. It was actually somewhere in Hume. I thought, oh, that sounds interesting, kind of working out emotions. In my own life, I'd had quite a lot of difficulties and traumas. So I was always kind of interested in anything that could kind of give me some information or ideas about, you know, what it's like when you're feeling upset or worried by things. I didn't know, you know, fully until I've grown into that role, how much of my own background was very important in actually going onto a course, because, you know, you're ultimately sharing your own personal stuff. So my reaction to it was that, oh, this is really interesting. I could sit with a group of people, I could create something and in a safe way just discuss what it is that I'd made, and that would give me some insights into maybe just how I was feeling at that point, at that time. Not necessarily on a massively deep level, but actually recognise there's a level of distress that I was carrying, and art therapy helped me connect with that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, during the COVID-19 pandemic, it's been truly overwhelming experience for so many people.
Mhm.
How does something like art therapy help people rediscover themselves and lessen the day-to-day impact it causes?
Well, I don't know if it means rediscovering yourself, but there might be that because, suddenly everybody's found themselves at home with not a lot to do. So, for families who may not have access to materials, that's an issue. So I wouldn't assume that people have got, pens and paper and all those things. But I think in terms of discovering new parts of yourself or new ways of sort of being, I think there's lots of opportunities, whether it's through colouring books. I was recently part of a training where they talked about, because we're using Zoom such a lot, you can actually
Yeah,
draw on your laptop or your tablet and just share images and pictures with each other. It might be a photograph that you've taken if you've had, your hours exercise, and just sharing something like that with a group of people doing the same thing. So it's a collective experience, and you're also connected with people. Some other things that, people will have noticed is that, we've got all these rainbows and hearts in windows. And I think somebody
yeah,
did, just on their own, just did a project where they just took pictures and that's on Facebook and asked everybody to send in a picture that they've done and put in their window. So it became a collective art project, and it's about a collective trauma, but just something as simple that everybody could probably draw a heart or a rainbow and then just share it as a group or as a neighborhood. So it doesn't have to be about in-depth work on trauma, but we're all going through this. Can we all contribute something? Can anybody just, draw something? And, I don't always talk about drawing, but sometimes, when I talk to clients, like, can you just make a mark in response to something? Which takes the pressure off drawing and, producing an image that's aesthetically pleasing. Sometimes it's just an opportunity to get something out of your body onto a piece of paper. And just sometimes by doing that in itself is therapeutic.
yeah. I think that's really powerful what you said there, and especially like, one of the reasons why I thought the Colours of COVID project, we set it up, was because of that. Really, we wanted people to have an expressive, an outlet for something. I saw all these rainbows and people colouring stuff, putting stuff out the windows, and I thought, it'd be great. And when you talked about what was the project you talked about, the collective?
Well, it was a young woman who did something. I saw it on TV. She did something. She did a heart. I think it's a yellow heart as a recognition of people who actually, I think, have got COVID in their family. And she put this yellow, I think it was a yellow heart, took a photograph of it, put it on Facebook, and invited other people to do the same. And suddenly this neighbourhood project created out of just, one person's wanting to say, when we've got a yellow heart in the window, it's because we need some help or we might need to deliver it. So all the things we keep seeing on the news about, local communities coming together, this was just like one of those things.
Yeah,
Someone had a suggestion, they shared it, and they were overwhelmed with the amount of images that came back. And to me, there's something about everybody can make a mark on a piece of paper and share that. So
yeah,
again, it might be something like, if everybody's really, crowded at home, you can often find a little corner with some crayons and just give everybody, a project, which is, draw me something about how you're feeling today. And then you can come back at the end of the day as family members and say, oh, right, that's what you did, or draw how you think I might be feeling today. And it's just a way of
yeah.
engaging people in the conversation, not just about making people like, we're all having a really tough time and we'll all have different experiences of it. And it's a way to bring people together in a very simple way.
We talked about this before about, have you seen a rise in people getting interested in art therapy? But I suppose you've kind of answered it a little bit there, really. It's not specifically art therapy, but just expressing themselves a little bit. So my question was, have you seen a rise in art therapy over the last few months?
I don't know if it's a rise in art therapy. I mean, there's certainly, I work online, so I've had, quite a few inquiries for it. But I think we've seen a rise in creativity, because I just look at again, I go back to the news stories. The amount of people said, well, we didn't realise that, there's all this stuff and services around. So particularly, where you've got shopkeepers who are saying, we just wanted to respond. So people have got creative ways of thinking, how do we support the community? We're all not working, or we're all being furloughed, or we've got an opportunity to actually give something back to the community. So I think what we've actually probably seen is a creative response by communities. I can't say the same about the government, but a creative response by community to actually recognise, there's people in our community who are struggling or isolated. And coming back to that thing about, creativity, I walk around and I'm so impacted by the amount of Black Lives Matter posters that, kids have drawn and put in the windows. That to me is something, really special. And yes, there's a whole debate around, the politics of it and, what that means for Black communities. But what we're seeing is we're seeing pictures that are being drawn by families in the window, which says to me, your life matters. And that's
Yeah,
really important when you're walking around or, you drive around and think, oh, right, there's another family who's made that effort. Or there's another rainbow there, there's another kid's drawing. And I think to me, there's some collective some collective experience I think is really important when we're all trying to sort of deal with stuff. And I think for too long, people have dealt with a lot of issues in isolation. This is probably the first time in many, many years we've had a collective response to something that feels like a threat, you know, to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my next question was about, do you find that art therapy helps people get more creative over turbulent periods? But you've kind of covered that with the idea that everyone's just been more creative in general, really. There might be some people who are unsure about whether to try art therapy or not. What would you say to those people, not to try to convince them, but encourage them to maybe that this might be something beneficial for them?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it's starting where people are. And I think one of the things that probably most people can connect to is that, you know, when you're on the phone chatting away or you're in a meeting, you're a bit bored and you start doodling. That's something that we naturally do. Yeah, if you look back in sort of history, you know, ancient cave paintings and paintings in rock, it's a natural human process to make marks and to leave a mark. And even things like, you know, I mean, I use lots of different ways to think about it because I work with so many different communities. You know, how many people have got a birth certificate with just a thumbprint on it or an X? You've
Yeah.
made your mark. That says you were here. So art therapy is a way of being seen, I would say, of having something that's on the inside of you that's not seen being put on the outside. And if you're willing and able to talk about what that image or that mark means to you, then that becomes the therapeutic process, and that's the relationship with the therapist. Anybody can engage in these art activities. There's lots of art therapy, colouring books, and just to be sat for maybe for 5 minutes of your day, colouring and doing something brings your heart rate down, brings your sort of levels of anxiety down. It can improve your memory just by being absorbed in something that's very mindful, that you just concentrating on that, because every day we're bombarded with all sorts of stuff that means we're sometimes overwhelmed just by trying to get through the day. It might be that I'm asking somebody just to spend 5 minutes just playing with some materials, see what they feel like, see what they smell like, see what comes up. We're not trying to say you're an artist, but is it something that feels pleasurable and that you enjoy doing? And if it is, that's the start of a conversation. You might want to take that a bit further. For people who are traumatized, of course, that's very risky. But again, it's about the reassurance, the developing a relationship with somebody, and saying that, you know, I value whatever it is that you put down as something that identifies you or your mark in this place at this time. I'm really distracted by that picture behind you, Adil, actually, because I mean, it's a really interesting one you've got there. Is it Don Quixote or something?
That was the image that kind of inspired Alchemy, really. I remember, I don't know if I told you, before I set up Alchemy, I was traveling around with the hippies around Europe. And it's basically an image that kind of spoke to me a lot with how I felt emotionally at the time. I just felt as though I wasn't really wanting to go into acting per se. I felt as though I was being thrown into being an actor to say other people's roles with terrorism and all that stuff that was going on at the time. And I just felt like I wanted to escape. And that spoke to me a lot. And my original logo for Alchemy was about this person who was just traveling on his journey to find what his meaning is. And I remember when I set up Alchemy, I just felt so relieved. It's like, you know, I felt as though I was doing something that I want to do. Still doing the art, still being creative, but doing something that means something so much more. And it's bigger than me. It's a bigger, you know, I was really successful doing stuff around, you know, getting BAFTA awards for films and blah, blah, blah. But it was, you know, for me, it was about leaving a legacy for my people, really. And that speaks to me. So every time I see it, it reminds me of, grounds me back to where we want. I think it's Pablo Picasso. I think it's one of his thingies. But it's something about the thingy donkey, really, a general on a donkey or something like that. But I just saw it as a guy traveling through, you know, Europe and stuff like that. So it meant something. So I tracked it down and got a canvas of it. So it was.
And that's a really good example of something that's inspired you. That I'm noticing it because I'm an art therapist, thinking, I really like it. I like the strokes in there. I like the way that, you know, the artist has used the kind of the marks and things, and to me it looks like it's a very active. So even having a conversation like we just had now about, okay, what was that about for you? You know, it's the sort of thing you can do with postcards. You know, there's loads of free postcards you get from art galleries, and one of the things I like to do is go into art galleries. I know things are a bit tricky at the moment, but you know, some of the things I do is like, well, what do you think of that? And it's not about, do you think it's a good one? Do you understand art? What do you feel when you look at that picture? Because that is valid. So again, if somebody doesn't actually want to make any marks or use clay or anything like that, we can actually use postcards and say, oh, just pick one that resonates with you today. And then
Yeah.
we just had a very sort of, quick conversation about, something I could see in the background. So for me, I think it's about really appreciating and understanding the importance that art has and art making has in our sort of sense of who we are as human beings, and that there's always a way to bring somebody into that process of thinking about mark making or identity or who you are, by really sort of attuning to somebody and where they're at. And if that is a conversation about, oh, well, you seem to always do that doula when you're on the phone. I wonder what's going through your mind at the time when you're doing that. Is it something that when you're bored, or you've been inspired by something that somebody said? It's just a way to always have that conversation about, we're constantly making marks. We might not call it art or art therapy, but we're always making marks or leaving a mark behind. Or what kind of mark do you want to leave behind for you, for your family? So to me, I think there's lots of different ways, and it's not about convincing somebody about art therapy. It's about giving them the opportunity or inviting them to have an access to something that might be helpful to them. It might not be. It doesn't work for everybody. But I think it's about having those opportunities. And I think art therapy is very much, it's not available enough. And people think about it as only being sort of something that's good for children or people with disabilities. Well, we all benefit from looking at art, creating art, and being in a kind of creative space that just allows some absorption and tells time to dwell, I think is one of the words I like to use. Just time to dwell.
Ola, I'm just conscious of time, and we got, I really want to continue this. One of the main reasons I wanted to get you on was because of our relationship when I first met you, when I was setting up Alchemy Arts, we were both based, and you were working with this mental health and wellbeing charity or social enterprise, and I was hot desking there to set up the organization. And the reason why it was significant, and I think the conversation that needs to happen, is around mental health, especially for, and we use the word BAME, Black, Asian, minority, ethnic, or whatever the legal term is.
I don't use those words at all. If we're going to reduce a massive majority of the population of the world down to 3 or 4 letters, I'm no good with that. When we start saying WAME or WAM, I'm all good with that. But, to reduce my, we're talking about majority, minority. We're a majority, group of the world. Most people are brown. So to reduce me to a minority is to minoritize me and to racialize me. And I'm not a racial being, I'm a human being.
Absolutely.
But
fantastic.
I will challenge you about that BAME business.
Yeah, good. No, that's why you're on. That's why I wanted you on. But I just wanted to say that the kind of discussions around mental health, about Black people, about Pakistani people being diagnosed with certain things, and the discussion around that, I think that's really important. And I'd love to kind of have another episode to kind of explore that a bit more, because I remember when I was setting you up at that time, and you probably not noticed at the time, but I remember going through a lot of changes and a lot of anxiety in my own kind of mental health. And someone who was always seen as supposed to be confident and, really boisterous, I found myself quite withdrawn at the time. And I think just discussing stuff with you without being diagnosed with anything was really helpful. So I just want to say thank you from a personal point of view for that period of time. And, there was a lot of stuff going on. But I think it's important.
I want to respond to that, I think, because one of the things I feel very strongly about is that, the words mental health should not even be together. Because what does it mean? That your mind is not okay? We had a really good report on Newsnight last night where she's talking about the woman there who was fired actually by the government for raising issues about austerity. And that, if you're living in poverty and you're living under stress and you've got, you're not got enough space in your house, you haven't got enough food, that would cause anybody to have difficulties. These are not separate problems to do with you as an individual. These are things that are actually happening around you. So, people's mental health, if you actually look at it, there's a correlation between poverty and poor, what we call mental health. Well, I think that's just about having access to, reasonable things like education, about feeling comfortable, about feeling supported, about feeling connected. So mental health is something that becomes something that we treat, as a separate thing from people. Well, actually, if I looked at your circumstances, I'd be thinking about, you're a young guy, you've come into a new organisation, you're not quite sure where you're going, you're on this journey, everything feels a bit unsettled. That's not mental health. That's about human experience and a response to distress or a response to change or a response to poverty. So I really struggle with this idea that we've got this mental health and mental health diagnosis. It's not something that I'm comfortable with. I have to say those things in some spaces, but in terms of actually calling it mental health, I think the whole thing, it needs to be looked at, because we're not separate bodies. And a really good example of this was somebody who had some physical health problems and some mental health problems. Now, they go to the physical wars to get the body fixed, but then they leave the mind out of that process. So where's the mind going? The mind's still in that body. So they're not separate things. We have to treat people as whole human beings who have responses and reactions which would be normal to abnormal circumstances. It would be normal to be depressed when your life's upside down. That's normal. Be normal to be worried and anxious when you haven't got kids, uniforms for the first week at school, or they're going back and you're worried about them getting ill, or you're worried about grandparents. That is a normal human response. When we start to categorize it as something to be treated and to be medicated, then I think we've really lost our humanity.
Yeah, and I think that's the worry really, and that probably that scared me the most was really about if we were to if young people, being a person that would I speak about this or going through this, those feelings, whether I would get medicated or people would say, oh, you need to have this medication, and it knocks you about. I remember, you go in with an ear infection for something, and they give you this medication, and suddenly, you can't even stand up straight, and that messes you up. So I'm really conscious about how we kind of treat people and medicating them, and how that reacts on, Black people, Pakistani people, people from, South Asian communities. That's something, a discussion that we need to kind of explore a little bit more, I think.
Yeah, and I think, if you want to have a conversation with somebody who knows a lot about, medication and some of the issues that are kind of going on in the local community now, there's a lot of work being done by NIMOS, and there's a Hearing Voices group there, there's a medication group there, there's a men's group there, and it's just people coming together in the community with no mental health input or at all, so-called mental health input, but just coming together as people who've got an interest in things, who are also creative people, who are also people who are distressed, but are also people who can support each other in different ways. So there's loads of stuff happening in Hume, close to where you are, that are actually bringing people together around creativity, and actually addressing some of the, some of the issues and the abuses within the sort of systems that people are subjected to. So that might be, somebody else could actually provide that input as well, from a different perspective.
Yeah, I've just got a question that a lot of the time I get a lot of phone calls just because people see a Pakistani or a Muslim name on a poster or a flyer, and I'm just wondering whether there's enough culturally appropriate kind of services out there for people, and especially, I was going to the gym. To give you an example, I was going to the gym, and there was an elderly, man, Pakistani man, started to talk to me about, really personal stuff and really emotional, trauma. And I was like, I haven't got the skills or the tools to maybe handle that. But I just spoke to him, and it seemed as though it helped him a lot. But to refer them on to places, I didn't know where to go. So you're saying places like Hume and stuff would be good for people to go.
Yeah, and I think just what you're saying now, I think that's a really good example of that. People, when they say, people, don't know where to go, or, maybe reluctant to talk about their issues. If you'd have thought that in that day that you might have an older member of your community coming to talk to you about very deep personal, I was thinking, well, that probably doesn't happen. It happens all the time. We have this misconception that people don't talk about what's going on for them. They might not use the words that the system uses. They might say things like, I'm tired all the time, or I've got a heavy heart, or I've got some problem in my family, or I've got a son who's a bit out of control. People are more than willing to talk about what's going on for them. It's whether or not the people who they're saying it to are willing to hear it just as a human story. And just seeing your reaction, thinking, whoa, I'm not really comfortable or, qualified for this. If it was your uncle, you would be well qualified. If it was your granddad, you'd be well qualified. If you knew the person, you'd be well, I know your son, and you know what, let's have a get together. Let's go meet up somewhere in the park. Let's have a sit down. If you just want to spend 5 minutes, just like getting rid of this stuff you've been carrying around, that's okay, because you're really just doing, a therapeutic way. You're just witnessing somebody else's difficult story and not saying, oh, well, we need a prescription, or I think you probably need some help. We do this naturally to human beings. We're all able and capable of talking about things that are really bothering us, not necessarily in the language of mental health, or I'm having a rubbish day, or my kid's getting on my nerves, or I can't seem to find it. And if you're able to listen, and when you've been in those places yourself, you pick up on something thinking, I think this person's kind of a bit distressed, or they seem a bit lost, or I saw them yesterday, they were kind of at the same shop and they don't seem to have anybody with them. It's that community response, isn't it? It's about how do we look after each other, and how do we give time to each other? Because in the pandemic, we've all had to slow down, and we've all maybe noticed our neighbours a little bit more. Or when I go to the water park, there's suddenly loads of people in the park that are saying good morning. Now those people are usually rushing off to work. I hope that this pandemic gives us all a different perspective on who are we as human beings, what do we value in life, what's important. Suddenly, having the big fancy car that you can fill up and drive out all over the place, it's not worth anything. Having the big holidays, they're not worth anything because you can't go. Yeah. What has been important is how we rallied round, how we've made sure when we've got people in the community we know have not got any money or are self-isolating, parcels turn up on their doorstep. And the thing that I've seen, you know, certainly the way it's been advertised on in the press and on the TV, is lots of Asian shopkeepers just stepping up. Now, I know that same shopkeepers have been suffering abuse for years from the community, but you know what? In this time, people stepped up and now value those as you know, members of society who stepped up when it mattered.
Yeah,
And I've
no,
been really,
definitely.
you know, been really warmed by the things that I've seen. I really have, and not from the government response, not from a
Yeah.
government response, from individual communities who are saying, we're all in it together, let's do what we can for each other. And that, I think, brings me back to, we've got creative responses, yeah, collecting stuff, shops delivering stuff, yeah, finding ways to make it safe. Just been so, to me, I've been, you know, I don't feel frightened of this pandemic, thinking, wow, I think I've just seen so many amazing things happen.
Ola, you know what? I'm just conscious that that we're kind of thinking out of time. We are going to edit snippets of this and put it all together, but I definitely want to schedule in something further down the line that we can talk about. Just finally, Ola, before we go, where can people find out more information? Is there anything that you want to plug, or people that they should contact, especially around art therapy or ways to overcome trauma maybe caused by
Well, I think if
COVID-19?
people look on the net and look for, you know, art therapists or even things like art activities, art ideas to do with the children, because I think engaging it is very therapeutic anyway. But, you know, if you're talking about overcoming trauma, that's a very sort of skilled way of working with somebody. But there's lots of art activities that people kind of look at, lots of family activity you can do that, you know, you might sort of decide you want to do. Even using things like your camera and your phone to kind of record little snips and share. That's all, you know, art. And I'll just say a little bit about yourself. There's so many different things you can do. And I'm just wondering, Adil, before we finish, if you would be willing or interested, we could actually do a kind of art therapy session together so people can see what it actually looks like and how it works. And it's something that we
Yeah.
can, we position the camera in a particular kind of way, because art therapy works absolutely beautifully online. It really is, because it can give people that distance that they need. If they're feeling a bit shy or a bit uncomfortable, we can draw on the screen together. We can just do something where we could demonstrate something that's actually about how you might use art materials in ways that kind of enable you to discover a little bit of something about you or yourself, or, you know, what we're doing together. And it's, you know, to me, it's a very much of a discovery process, or just some fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd 100% be up for that. Yeah, I think it'll be really good. And you know, one of the fears, and this is honestly, this is the last question. One of the fears that I found with, especially with the Pakistani community, was that they felt as though that when they're going through any sort of anxiety or trauma or something, just worry something, if they feel as though if they talk about it, or if they go to the GP or something like this and say something, that they will automatically be kind of diagnosed with something, put into some sort of room and wrapped up in a thingy. What is the process with that? What usually happens if someone goes to the GP and asks for something?
Well, I think everybody's experience is individual, so it might be to kind of, you know, have a word with the GP, or find out from other people who've maybe got the same GP or have been into those situations, just what the experience was like. Because often I think and it's really important to say for Black communities, and I can't speak for the same for Asian communities, but people are often going at the point of the highest distress. So not when it started 6 months ago, when, you know, they'd lost a member of the family or they'd lost a job. They're coming in that crisis, and that will be absolutely true, because we have services that are not culturally competent, that make all kind of assumptions about people's assets and difficulties. And the fact that we've got Black Minds Matters is a whole new organisation developing. The fact that, you know, I've been part of a BACP group who, when you actually, you know, are talking to other therapists and counsellors, it's shocking how much racist remarks I've seen in that profession. So, you know, I'm not going to say that everybody's like that, but what people have experienced and that I've been shared with personally about working with therapists, and, you know, the majority of us are, you know, white therapists. Therefore, when Black people are looking for a service or Asian people looking for a service, it's about finding a culturally appropriate service, so you don't actually cause harm in that interaction. Because if you receive, you know, a negative response from somebody, on top of already being anxious and traumatized, you've just then made it clear to that person they're not there to be helped or welcomed in that space. And I think we've got huge issues in the profession about how do we actually support communities when our, you know, therapists are not culturally competent, and they're actually, you know, making some of those situations much worse by the way in which people are interacted with.
Fantastic. Ola, thank you so much for, you know, spending time with us and giving a deeper insight into this. I want to do this again and have a longer conversation if we can. And just last thing to say, just thank you so much for coming on, man. Thank you so much.
And thank you. And now I know a lot more about that image. And every time I see that image now, I'll think of you, Ada.
Just wanted to say before we go, Ola, thank you so much for sharing such a deeper understanding of art therapy and mental health in general, providing plenty of insight on the topic. All that's left to be said is we hope you've enjoyed listening to episode 4 of Colours of COVID. Don't forget to share this around. You can find us in all the usual places like Spotify, YouTube, and even on our website. And that's all. Look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Stay safe, stay well, and look forward to seeing you again. Take care. Bye-bye.